tissues are replaced by stem cells. As you can see in the diagram, the first layer shows the epithelium layer of tissues. Under it is mucosa with straight-sided crypts. Stem cell at crypt base divides to supply new cell for the surface, which will renew. Here you can see in the diagram, the blue cells are the self-renewing cells. There are three type of cell-renewing cells: labile cells, stable cell, and permanent cells. Let's look at the labile cell first. They are constantly self-renewing. For example, in bone marrow derived cells, epithelium generally have short lifespan, high turnover, and are quick to regenerate following the trauma. Stable cells are also self-renewing but as required from the stem cells or mature cells. They may divide in limited fashion. They also have long lifespan. For example, liver, which regenerate effectively after the injury if sufficient normal liver will remain. Then we have permanent cell. Permanent cell also have long lifespan but little or no capacity to self-renew because they are permanent. For example, brain cells, cardiac cells, muscles, all these are permanent cells. Damage causes tissue loss in heart, scars tissue forms in the brain, the tissue will liquefies. Let's look at the general types of cell. Epithelium covers the surface covers the surfaces cell bind each other to form an impermeable barrier specialized to the local needs. Neuroectoderms, neurons, melanocytes, and neuroendocrine cells are all the type of epithelium cells. Hemo, uh, Poietic and lymphoreticular cells are the bone marrow derived cells and they are precursors. Mature cells are mobile and they can circulate in many are able to circulate. Then we have connective tissue. These are the soft cells. Supporting tissues, for example, fat, bone, fibrous tissues, nerve insulation, cartilage, muscles, including smooth, striated, and cardiac muscles. Endothelium lines the vascular system. Then we have germ cells, haploid generative cells in testes and ovaries, and placenta, which are the trophoblast. Most damaging agent affects tissues directly, but what watershed zone infarction can occur as an indirect consequence, diminished blood flow at the watershed between zones supplied by the end of the artery. So here you can see in the intestine, this is the watershed zone, and in the brain, this is the watershed zone highlighted in purple. The effect of damage will depend on the tissue types affected and the type of damaging agent. Two main types of cell death: coagulative and liquefactive necrosis, and distinctive histological subtype: fibroid, caseous, and fat necrosis. The clinical observation of gangrenous necrosis refers to the black ends, ischemic extremities. Dry gangrene is due to infarction. Infarction is the coagulative necrosis, and wet gangrene has a supra-added infection causing liquefaction. First, let's look at the normal tissue. Cells have nuclei and distinct cell outline. Coagulative necrosis, for example, in renal infarct, cell outline preserved but cell content degenerate. Liquefactive necrosis, necrotic material will liquefy, for example, in brain abscess content. So here you can see this is the liquefied part of the brain. Fibroid necrosis, blood vessels destruction by eosinophil fibrinoids material, for example, vasculitis. Caseous necrosis is the tuberculosis, crumbly necrotic debris combining coagulative and liquefactive features, granulomatous reaction. So granules will form here. Fat necrosis follows the trauma and form hard nodule which can be mistaken for the tumors in breast. Starting with the normal tissue types, epithelium. Epithelium is derived from the embryonal ectoderms which lines the body surface and they regenerate and heals quickly. Three types of epithelium tissues are there: squamous, glandular, and urothelial. Squamous function as the barrier and protect against the friction. Stratified squamous and simple squamous are the subtype of squamous tissue. Stratified squamous will cover the skin, pharynx, tongue, esophagus, anus, and vagina. Simple squamous forms the mesothelium lining the pleural and peritoneal cavities. Pathologist regards endothelium as a separate entity from the simple squamous epithelium. Glandular lines all the secretory organ. Function is it function as secretion, ion transfer, and clearance. Secretion can be non-specialized or specialized. For non-specialized include mucin to trap bacteria in the nose, assist food transit in gut. Specialized include hormone or acid secretion. Ion transfer can occur in renal tubules. Clearance, ciliated bronchial cells remove inhaled particles which are stuck in the mucin. Urothelial or formally transitional layer of epithelium. This is the pseudostratified epithelium which lines the urinary tract. It contains umbrella cells that maintain the integrity of surface on stretching the to accommodate urine. Next we have neuroectodermal derived tissue. Neuroectodermal derived tissue forms the central and peripheral nervous system. They are scattered as neuroendocrine cells, populate various epithelia, and secrete site-specific substance. For example, in skin, they secrete melanocytes, gut hormone secreting cell in the bronchus, where they are thought to give rise to pulmonary small cell carcinoma. Then we have connective tissue. This form the structural tissue. Connective tissues include fat, bones, fibrous tissue, cartilage, and nerve sheet. Fat are stored as lipid, can regenerate, and may secrete a response to cytokine. Adipokines can drive inflammation. Bone, the word for the bone tissue will always start with osteo, consists mainly of matrix containing sparse osteocyte and is constantly remodeled by osteoblast which lay down matrix and osteoclast. Fibrous tissue such as tendon may consist mainly of acellular and avascular collagenous tissues. Cartilages consist of avascular matrix. Chondrocytes are embedded in cartilages which heals poorly. Nerve sheet, neurofibrous tissues. These are the several nerve sheets component which may undergo benign proliferation after amputation or form malignant tumor. Next is smooth muscles. Form the wall of medium size and large blood vessels and lymphatic, uterine myometrium and vaginal wall and muscular layer of GIT, respiratory and urological tract. Striated tissue forms voluntary muscles and regeneration is limited in the striated tissue. Cardiac tissue, myocardium only, they do not ever regenerate. Endothelium arise from blood islands of embryonal mesoderm. Different types line blood vessels, lymphatic and hepatic, and splenic sinusoids. Endothelium readily regenerates. Hemopoietic and lymphoreticular tissues. These tissues generate blood cells and form the immune system of the body. Germ cells, these are the ovarian and testicular reproductive cell. They are constantly produced by testes. The ovary contain a finite numbers of from the birth. Next is proliferation and regenerative capacity. Let's look at labile tissue first. They will readily regenerate and constantly proliferate in life, for example, in epithelia of skin and GIT and bronchus. Stable tissue includes liver and kidney and can, if necessary, regenerate but usually show only very limited cell turnover. The liver has huge regenerative capacity, over half can be removed, yet the remainder can undergo compensatory regeneration. Then we have permanent tissue. They don't have any capacity to regenerates. Stem cells are the progenitor cells that can potentially form any tissue, but they cannot respond to local hormones or cytokines. They divide to form a copy of themselves, but plus a population of committed progenitor cells, which divide into trans-amplifying cells and after division yields terminally differentiated cells which die once their lifespan is over. Cell replacement in tissue with high turnover is by stem cell. In tissue such as liver with low cell turnover, replacement of individually damaged cells is by division adjacent cells, but larger amount of hepatocyte loss requires stem cell for replacement. Tissue necrosis. Necrosis is form of unregulated cell death which has a variety of causes, chiefly because of physical trauma, infection, infarction, or chemical. Appearance of necrosis will vary according to the stimulus of the tissue. Major types of necrosis are coagulative, liquefactive, caseation, and fat. Coagulative, as we said, is due to ischemia, is commonest and usually appears to as a firm, pale, wedge-shaped region of tissue reflecting the tertiary supplied by an occluded arterioles. The cells retain their shape but lose their nucleus and are also known as ghost cells. Liquefactive necrosis are typically affects the central nervous system, often after a stroke. Abs- uh, Abscess also shows liquefactive necrosis due to enzymic digestion of tissue by infecting organism. Caseation is white, crumbly, cottage cheese-like appearance found in tuberculosis and some fungal infection. It is a mixture of coagulative and liquefactive necrosis. Fat necrosis are hard, bright yellow nodules of fat. Necrosis occur possibly secondary to trauma and may become classified as and resemble tumor clinically. Digestion of fat by pancreatic enzymes with fat necrosis and calcification is commonly seen in acute and chronic pancreatitis. Types of infarction. Infarction is necrosis of a tissue and organ due to disruption of its blood supply. In atrial infarction, there is inadequate flow into the organ, and in venous infarction, the outflow is obstructed, preventing flow through the organ and causing congestion and stagnation. Atrial infarction is typically due to occlusion of vessels by thrombus and embolus. External compression is rare. Venous infarction often reflects the compression of vein as occur in strangulation of a hernia. Bring us to the end of the chapter. Thank you for watching. If you like my video, don't forget to subscribe for more.